All right, thank you for joining us tonight, you guys. So we have received an abundance of questions about the community college programs and how they're working, the new funding that the state has provided this year. So the guidance department reached out to HCC, Ebony, and Michael from STIC, and they're here to present some of the information. So I'm going to hand it off to them so they can present all the good stuff. Thank you, guys.
All right, so starting out, my name's Ebony Dono. I'm from Holyoke Community College. I do have some info up front afterwards if you guys want to grab it. My card's also up there as well. You guys are my territory. I'm your high school rep, so you might see me again. Starting off, why HCC might be right for you. So going from here, once you apply to HCC, all you're going to need is your high school transcript, your final high school transcript. So after you are done, you graduate, reach out to your high school counselors. They'll send it over to us directly, and that will be considered official. If you have a 3.0 GPA that can waive English testing, you won't have to come in and do that. And then if you took Algebra 2 and you passed Algebra 2 with a B+ or higher, that can also waive math testing for that AccuPlacer. You also have to provide proof of Massachusetts residency. That also does play a factor into how you would be qualified for the Mass Educate, which the next slide will go into Mass Educate, and that does cover both STIC and us because it is for all community colleges in the state of Massachusetts. And then from there too, for our selective programs, you're going to want to make sure that you're looking at those dates because our selective programs, they tend to open up in September and then they close in February. So if you are a senior coming out of college, nursing, radiology technician, vet tech, and vet assistant, those do have deadlines and you most likely will not be able to come in right out of high school. You might have to do some prerequisites and then apply for the following year. And then from there, you're going to do the application. It's on our website, so if you go to hcc.edu, it is under the admissions tab. You'll create an account, apply. You do have to select a major if you would like to utilize the free community college. If you select not seeking a degree, you would not be able to get financial aid, which means you would not be able to get the free community college. Yes, you do have to complete the financial aid form in order to get the free community college because it is free, but it is a form of aid, so you do have to do that form. Then from there, placement testing. So that testing I was talking about waiving if you have that GPA score. You might have to come in, do placement testing, English and math. It's pretty much just to see where your student is performing. If they're performing at the college level, they go straight into college classes. If not, they might have to take developmental classes, but that's just so that they're prepared for what they're going to go into. And then the last step would be signing up for classes. Students cannot register for classes until they take the AccuPlacer or if the class is waived. And then once you're accepted, you can register for classes, get your textbooks. If you have online classes, making sure you're keeping up with your email so that you see the correspondence from your professor. But again, you have to take the AccuPlacer or waive that testing to go into there. Now going into Mass Educate. If you're eligible, you have to be enrolled in at least 6 credits, or oftentimes that is 2 classes. You have to be in an aid-eligible degree or program. So for example, at HCC, the only 2 programs that we offer that is not aid-eligible, well 3, is not seeking a degree, vet assistant, because there's not enough credits in there, and our economic certificate program, just because there's not enough credits in the certificate program overall, so it's not aid-eligible regardless. You also could not have earned a bachelor's degree. For Mass Reconnect, I believe you cannot earn an associate's degree, but for Mass Educate, which is for 18 and older, you cannot have a bachelor's degree. You have to be a Massachusetts resident for at least a year. If your student has not lived in Mass for a year, once they hit that year mark, they can complete a tuition classification form, and then from there they'll start receiving the free community college. And then for some students without legal status, there is another form that you would fill out. Instead of FAFSA, you're going to fill out MASFA. And that's only for students who might not be currently a legal student. If you're a legal resident, that would apply to you. And then going over this, our student support programs. Support programs that we have to offer at HCC, we have Alana Men in Motion. We have the Office of Disability and Deaf Services. That's for students that might have an IEP, a 504, a documented disability. Even if you don't have a documented learning disability, if you have high anxiety, if you have depression, if you have trauma, something that might affect the way that you learn, sit down with the office, see what accommodations they can give you, because oftentimes they can work with students so that they can succeed in class. We also have SAMP, that's for our female identifying students. We have TRIO, that's for first generation, low income, or students with a documented learning disability. You get an advisor in there, you'll be able to sit down with them weekly, bi-weekly, whatever works best. It's nice to have someone on campus just to ask those questions to, and just a pinpoint. You can go in there, chat, do that. I was a TRIO student, I was first generation, so it was really nice to have someone on campus because my family wanted to help, but oftentimes they didn't know where even to start. And then going into athletics, we have women's soccer, men's soccer, cross country, wrestling, volleyball. Holyoke is home of volleyball. Basketball, baseball, our men's baseball team is really good. And then we have over 52 clubs. I know it says 30 in there, but they've added clubs. They just added a whole e-sport club, stuff like that. And then I believe that's it for the short presentation. Oh, fast facts. So 67% of our students are part-time. A lot of our students are adult learners. They come back, they work full-time, and they go to school part-time. We're a Hispanic serving institution. Over 1/3 of our students receive Pell Grants. So if your student is a student that does qualify for a Pell Grant, the way Mass Educate works, it's last dollar amount. So when your student comes, they complete their financial aid form, FAFSA is gonna see what type of aid they're gonna receive first, apply that aid, any type of scholarships they may receive. So for the MCAS, even though I know they just passed that law, but if you took the MCAS and you get the John and Abigail scholarship, they'll apply that first, and then Mass Educate will come and cover the rest. So if your student does receive enough scholarships to cover the cost, Mass Educate is not going to be used for them because it's still technically free to them. But if your student doesn't receive any type of scholarships, any types of grants, and they owe the full amount, Mass Educate will then come in towards the end of the semester to cover the remainder of the aid, okay? And that's it for HCC. We do offer an event called Welcome Wednesdays. You can come every other Wednesday. So we do have one coming up next week, Wednesday, from 11 to 12, and then we offer an evening session from 5 to 6. It consists of an information session. You can ask those questions, and then we give you a tour of the campus. And that's it for me.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Rossi. I'm the admissions coordinator at Springfield Technical Community College. So a lot of the information that was just presented here, particularly about the free college programs, applies equally to all 15 community colleges within the Commonwealth. It is, as has been stated, is a last dollar award. So it is vital that if you or your students, because remember, Mass Educate exists, it's the new program that the state just unveiled, but prior to that, they had Mass Reconnect, which was the same idea, but it was limited to people 25 years or older. So for parents that are here in the crowd too, this is something you yourself can potentially take advantage of. As was mentioned, you can't have a bachelor's degree and be eligible for the program, but if you, under Mass Educate, if you already have a 2-year degree and an associate's degree, you can qualify for a second associate's degree under Mass Educate. So it's not just the younger students that are still in high school, it is older learners that can take advantage of these programs at the 15 community colleges as well. So just make sure that if you're applying for the program in December, if you have a senior right now, or you yourself is looking to take advantage of these programs, make sure you get a FAFSA done when that becomes available later this year in September, because it is a last dollar amount. It's probably the same at Holyoke, but when we calculate students' eligibility for either Mass Reconnect or Mass Educate, it's done in tandem with the processing of your financial aid award. It's done by the same office. It is technically not a form of financial aid, but as you, the student, as you kind of the end user, your experience, it gets calculated the same way, so it might as well be, from your experience, a financial aid award. All right. If STC, a lot of the same things apply that you saw on the Holyoke slides. We are an open enrollment institution, just like all the 15 community colleges are. Just like our sister institution, the only thing we require for admissions is completion of our online application and submission of either a high school transcript or a high school diploma for students who have already completed high school. We do have selective admissions programs as well. Like Holyoke, there are allied health programs, and if any of you are interested in those programs, our School of Health is having an open house this upcoming Monday night. I do have some flyers up here if you're interested in those. But basically, the onboarding process is extremely similar at all the 15 community colleges. Once the student has been accepted, there's an enrollment process. The student may or may not have to take placement tests. Just like at HCC, it's based on the student's high school GPA. They may be exempted from those placement tests. We do our testing a little bit differently nowadays. We don't use the AccuPlacer anymore. We use a self-directed placement, and it's more of a guideline. So we want to see where the student feels their strengths and weaknesses are in math and English, and it's a little less deterministic than it used to be in the past. Instead, that's meant to be a jumping off point to start a conversation the student will have with their academic advisor about where they feel comfortable starting in classes. If you have someone like myself who was not good in math when they were in school and has been out of school for a very, very long time, I probably would choose to take some developmental math classes if I was jumping into a program that required a fair amount of mathematics. But it's really going to be up to the student and their academic advisor to have that conversation and see where it's going to be appropriate for them to start off in those courses. Did you want to open it up to questions at this point? Yeah, do you guys have any questions? And you please feel free to address it to either of us or a particular school. Yes, please.
So I just want to make sure I'm hearing it right. It's a last funding, so let's just say a kid doesn't qualify for any financial aid. Are you saying that it's completely free through Mass Education?
Yeah. Just, for example, if a student gets a full ride through things like financial aid and other grants, they won't get any Mass Educate or Mass Reconnect money because they don't need any. The converse, the opposite is true as well. If a student gets no financial aid whatsoever, but they meet the other eligibility requirements, at that point, Mass Educate or Mass Reconnect, depending on where our financial aid office, and I'm sure it's the same at Holyoke as well, is going to see which program best fits the student's financial needs. And at that point, really, Boston is on the hook for everything. So basically, if they meet the eligibility requirement, Boston is paying for what the Pell Grant or the Mass Grant will not pay for. And in some cases, depending upon the household income, there's also things like book stipends under both programs that the student or the family may qualify for as well. It's a great program, Yale Millionaire's Tax.
Just a follow-up question on that. So
Yeah.
if you have a high school senior and they have no idea what they want to do, where they want to go, do they have to commit to a certain number of years, or can they do a year of taking classes and kind of figuring out things?
Yes, and we were just talking about this beforehand. I think both of us would probably recommend if you have a completely undecided student, they should start off in a general studies or liberal arts major at one of the community colleges, and at least for that first semester, take those core liberal arts classes, which are very broadly applicable towards any number of majors: English composition, psychology, U.S. history, a math class, perhaps a biology class or something like that. And that is going to really get them started and be broadly applicable towards a wide variety of not only associate's degrees, but bachelor's degree programs as well, because a lot of students are using our schools to jump off to bigger and better things and go on to those four-year colleges through mass transfer with the joint admissions agreements that we have with the private four-year colleges.
And do you have to finish the two-year program to qualify for the financial aid, or could the student do 1 year and then transfer?
Students can do 1 year and transfer, depending upon how and where you're transferring. It may not be a guaranteed transfer onto a particular program. Usually, if we're talking mass transfer, the community college pathway, the four-year state colleges, you usually need to graduate with the associate's degree and get a minimum GPA. It's very broadly a 2.5, with the exception of 4 specific programs if you're going to go to UMass Amherst: engineering, nursing, computer science, and business. But those require a slightly higher GPA, but all the other programs, all the other four-year state colleges, just a 2.5. And that is a guarantee to a particular program. You can also take at both the community colleges a just kind of selection of these liberal arts courses like we were talking about, and those courses will transfer, but that pathway doesn't necessarily guarantee transfer into a particular major or program at the four-year college.
I would even add too, if your student knows where they want to go, like if they have a four-year school already in mind, but you're kind of like maybe saving that money for the first 2 years, make sure they're sitting down with the transfer counselors. Stick also has transfer counselors, so they'll sit down with the transfer counselors, talk about the institution they want to transfer after the fact, and that way they're making sure they're taking classes at our institutions that will be applicable to their institution they want to transfer to.
Is Mass Educate first-time student? Like, so if you have a student who starts at like UMass and then decides this isn't for me, wants to transfer to
As long as they don't have their bachelor's degree, yeah. As long as they don't already have a bachelor's degree obtained, they can come. We have a lot of students right now that are transferring from four-year institutions to our institution, so they can save that money beforehand.
a secondary question. There used to be like if UMass didn't have a program, if the state schools didn't have a program and Connecticut school systems did, you could apply for like sort of in-state tuition. I'm curious, since community college is free in Connecticut, and we have a similar program in Massachusetts, like I think there used to be cosmetology, there were some other programs that have been cut that are at like Montauk. Is there any, do you know yet if there's any kind of like articulation where you can?
So I can't speak from Massachusetts to Connecticut, but if a student is in northern Connecticut and they're coming to Massachusetts, we do have, broadly there's the New England Regional Student Program, which encompasses all the New England states, and if you have a major like heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, it doesn't exist at any of the community colleges in Connecticut. So if a student from anywhere in the state of Connecticut attends STCC for that particular major, they qualify for something called reciprocal tuition. It's a little more expensive than in-state tuition, but not nearly as expensive as out-of-state tuition. We get a lot of students, obviously, from where we're at, and I'm sure Holyoke does as well, from northern Connecticut, Hartford County, Enfield, suburbs, etc. And what we do is we calculate door-to-door distance. So we look at the closest community college or community colleges in Connecticut, and if they have that same major, if we're closer to them, door-to-door distance from the student's home, we can offer them the reciprocal tuition rate. If the other colleges, Montauk, Manchester, Capital Community College is closer to their home, unfortunately, because of the way we are a state college, we have to charge them out-of-state tuition, which is based on program and proximity.
So we don't know yet about like a Mass Educate kind of transfer?
It wouldn't apply because this is only from Massachusetts. If you're talking about a student from Massachusetts going to Connecticut, as far as I'm aware, it wouldn't apply because this is a program from Massachusetts community colleges.
And then
So
Connecticut
now
has,
it's for Mass.
because
I mean-
Connecticut has free community college, but I don't think it's.
Right, and I think that would be for Connecticut residents only. I don't think this particular type of program crosses state boundaries. However, that being said though, if you are a Massachusetts resident, you may qualify for an in-state or reciprocal tuition at a Connecticut school based on that school's particular programs. But these free college programs that we're talking about are specifically for residents of that state going to a community college within that college, or that state's college system.
With this change, with the Mass Educate, what is your, and I got an associate's from STIC a really long time ago, so I don't have the experience, but what is the class size that these students would be entering into the coming year? Like, do you see class size, if they were 15, do you forecast it jumping to 30, or where would that fall?
They would create more sections, and it's the same at both community colleges. Faculty have a course load that they have in a maximum, usually the biggest classroom, and I think it would be the same at Holyoke, 30 students is the largest classroom size that we have. Average classroom size is probably typically around 15 to 20. So instead of loading up more students in a classroom, they would create more sections of that individual course. So instead of having 40 sections of English Composition 1 in the fall semester, they add sections onto that, iterations of that same course.
I know, like, for something right now that's currently happening is that we are currently hiring more professors so that we can accommodate the students that we have. But like he said, we're not going any larger than 30 students, and that's kind of a rare case to have 30 students in a class. I would say a lot of the classes that I'm currently seeing right now caps at 20.
And all 15 community colleges are going through this right now. After years of shrinking enrollments, this program has made our enrollments boom, tremendous amount. So right now, all the community colleges throughout the state are going through this process of having to accommodate more students. That's going to be hiring more faculty members and more staff members to deal with the larger influx of students, and we're all going through that right now.
So if you have a master's degree, you can teach at the community college level.
My question was, where can I go to find out more information about the transfer relationships you have?
So on our site, I know we have a site directly for transfer students. I actually brought some of the pamphlets too for our transfer office.
Yep. And we have the same as well. And then if you're looking at staying within the state college system, there's actually the mass transfer website, which will actually show. You can go, if I'm starting at GCC, if I'm starting at, whatever, any one of the 15 community colleges, you can select a major and see what the transfer pathways are onto the four-year state colleges. And both schools will have, probably on their transfer affairs page, the articulation agreements with the private colleges. So if you want to go to AIC, you want to go to ELHS, you want to go to Bay Path, we have individual transfer programs with those colleges as well.
Great, thank you.
If the ultimate goal of the student was to go to UMass Amherst, but they wanted to do the first 2 years at the community college, do you apply to UMass first? So you just take your classes, the correct classes, and then apply to UMass?
Correct. Yeah, for mass transfer, they call them transfer pathways. At our level, they're majors, right? Like if you go into business transfer, you go into liberal arts transfer, we have a lot of the same transfer programs at both institutions. And basically, with the exception of those four majors at UMass Amherst that I mentioned, the business, engineering, computer science, and nursing, if you graduate from either Holyoke or Stick or any of the 15 community colleges in one of those transfer eligible majors, as long as you get a 2.5 or higher, it is a guaranteed transfer, and as part of the articulation, they're going to accept 100% of the credit. The students will transfer to whichever state college as a junior to finish their last 2 years of their degree.
Something to keep in mind though is that that is only for the mass transfer option. So if your student does have a private institution in mind, make sure they are connected with the transfer office, because you don't want your student to spend the 2 years taking classes that they think might be transferable, and then they go and apply to that institution, and that institution's like, oh, we don't take transfer credits, because some institutions don't take transfer credits. It depends on where you want to go after the fact.
As was mentioned before, if you're going to go out of state or to a private college that our schools don't have an existing agreement with, backwards engineering, just like was mentioned, see what those requirements are and kind of dance to that particular college's tune, if that makes sense, because every college is different. Just definitely got to reiterate that. It's very good advice.
More of a really down and dirty specific question. You had mentioned the vet tech program. What was the difference there with that could or could not be covered on that screen with the vet tech?
So vet tech can be covered, vet assistant can't be, which vet assistant's only a year program anyways, it's just a certificate program. Vet tech is technically higher up in the workforce anyways, so we tend to push students to do vet tech than vet assistant regardless when they come and ask our opinion. But vet assistant's not covered just because there's not enough credits offered in the certificate program overall. So even without Mass Educate, it's still going to be covered by financial aid. They don't have to pay out of pocket for that.
You mentioned that the transfers for nursing programs don't exist, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So yeah, for most of our nursing students, it really depends upon the college. Most of our nursing students, once they complete their RN associate's degree, are typically going to try and transfer out to UMass Amherst or Westfield State University. Both of those four-year state colleges offer accelerated ASN to BSN programs. So if you're coming from Holyoke or you're coming from Stick, you already have the associate's degree. If you transfer out to those schools, then you'd have roughly 1 more year to complete the bachelor's degree in nursing. And typically at both colleges, if you want to go to nursing, which is highly selective at both our schools, you're going to be doing at least 1 year, doing some type of pre-nursing track to take your prerequisites and co-requisites because they are selective, 2 years in the nursing programs themselves, and then transfer out to Westfield or UMass, and then you have And there's a couple different options at some of the schools. I think Westfield has a part-time option, but the accelerated options are roughly 13 months with the associate's degree in nursing from one of the community colleges to finish the bachelor's degree in nursing. If you want to go to a private college like ELHS or another college that has an RN degree, as we discussed before, you really need to consult with them, and that's a college we don't have a set transfer pathway with like we do with the state universities. So you may need to see what their requirements are, or in some cases, even if they take transfer students into their RN program. But again, for most schools, it's usually going to be staying within that state college system and moving on to Westfield or UMass for the accelerated programs they have after getting a bachelor's degree from one of our schools. The associate's degree, excuse me.
Can you speak to the engineering one?
So for our end, we do have an engineering transfer program. It's a traditional calculus-based engineering program. The vast majority of our transfer students go on to UMass Amherst. Western New England University is probably a distant second. That is one of those mass transfer programs where the GPA requirement is higher than the 2.5. I do not have that at the top of my head right now, but if you go to the mass transfer page, it will tell you. And basically it's the same idea, just a target GPA you need to hit for the seamless transfer is a little bit higher than the norm because those 4 majors, engineering being one of them, are highly selective at UMass Amherst. But we have a long track record of transferring engineering students onto UMass.
Same thing. I believe it's a 3.0. I believe that's the number that they're looking for, but don't quote me right now. It's also
And can we take some of those dual enrollment in the senior year and then move along to your...
Absolutely. If you want to do dual enrollment, those are college credits you can do as long as they're within the curriculum of the major that you're transferring onto. You can apply those towards your associate's degree, or you could take them at Holyoke and then transfer them to STCC or vice versa. Or students often, obviously the free college route now through Mass Educator, Mass Reconnect is kind of the way to go now, but students have also done dual enrollment courses and then gone directly to the 4-year colleges if they want to. They just need to get their official transcript from the community college where they did those classes and forward them on to whatever college they're going to matriculate at.
And also, too, if your student's interested in a selective program, dual enrollment is something great to look at, to see, because we were speaking earlier about it. For some of the selective programs, if they want to see if they can apply straight out of high school, if they start dual enrollment early enough, for your seniors, that might not apply, but if you have any younger kiddos, if they start it early enough, they might be able to get those credits depending on their schedule, depending on how many dual enrollment classes they do. They might be able to graduate and go straight into one of the selected programs if they are selected. I've had it happen one time, so it's possible, but it is challenging.
All right, thank you guys for joining us tonight. If you have any other questions, the guidance department will be up front for a little bit, and they'll be sticking around for a little bit to answer any personalized questions you may want to ask in the forum. So thank you for coming tonight. Have a good one.